weekday at noon Eastern.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into a Monday, January 23rd edition of Daily Faceoff Live. We're streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, as well as, of course, dailyfaceoff.com. He's former NHL netminder, current Daily Faceoff analyst, Mike McKenna. Mike, what's up?
I'm just trying to calm down over a blown call in a squirt game yesterday. But you know what? I'm kind of proud of myself. I think I handled it okay. I just talked to the ref. So I didn't blow up, Frank. How was your weekend?
Yeah, seek help. I actually had a moment in our Might game on Sunday where I made a bad change. It actually wasn't a bad change from my perspective in the sense that I called the kid off and he decided to just stop skating, and I sent the other kid on, and the referee just skated by. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to let that one go." And I was like, "Hey, thanks." Nice. That was really nice. Yeah. So
must be a big Daily Faceoff fan.
Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. Let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock, and let's start with the gift that keeps on giving from a news perspective in the Vancouver Canucks. What a last week it was for the franchise. Some would argue in Vancouver, some of the darkest moments in franchise history with the way that Bruce Boudreau and his firing was handled. The worst kept secret in pro sports. Rick Tochet takes over as the 21st head coach in franchise history. Mike, I want you to give me one word of how to best describe what's unraveled in Vancouver.
Circus. Just an absolute circus, man. Like to leave a guy like Boudreau hanging in the wind for the better part of 2 months. I mean, he was like taking a slow motion walk down the plank for that period of time after Rutherford threw him under the bus and just kept going over him in the comments to the media back then. And it was pretty clear that Boudreau wasn't the guy that they wanted to be their head coach. And now, you know, it comes out 2 months later, you make the change, you go to Rick Tochet, and all the writing had been on the wall forever. And the team turns around and just says, well, you know what? We didn't cause all this speculation. Basically blamed it on the media that this started to happen. It's like, no, you got to keep your house in order here. Like, you connect the dots, like keep your public comments like to a minimum here in line, keep them in line and not tip people off to what's happening, right? Like, it was pretty obvious that this was going to happen. So there's been so many things that have happened in Vancouver this year, Frank. It's like, what's next, man? Like, is this it? I hope this is it, because that fan base deserves better.
Yeah, so Jim Rutherford actually spoke about his public comments. Take a listen.
Now, part of this process, and I will apologize to Bruce for this, is probably in my interviews over the course of the season, when people ask me a question, I'm probably too direct and too honest. And so that goes back to my comment about team playing with structure, more structure, and things like that. I've done that my whole career. I've tried to be honest. I've tried to answer the best I can. And sometimes that affects certain people. And in this case, it probably did affect him. And I'm sorry I did that. And I've learned from it. So I've decided that I need to zip it. I'm not going to talk about the team. I'm going to let Patrick and Rick talk about the team and just stay away from those things. But unfortunately, it's turned out the way it did. Nobody takes great pride in this. I've known Bruce for a long time. He's been a friend, and I feel very bad about it.
It's one thing to feel bad about it, Mike, but it's another thing to be in complete control of the situation and then let it slip away that way. And so I think we all appreciate Jim Rutherford's honesty, but when you're in the second or third week of the season and things have spiraled out of control and you go on Hockey Night in Canada and you very pointedly combat and go after the structure that this team plays with, well, that just turns it into open season for how people view your coach. And then you admit last week that you have been engaging in conversation with prospective coaches for months. Well, it kind of tells everyone what you think of Bruce Boudreau and the job that he's done. And Mike, you know who I actually felt worst for on Sunday? That was Rick Tochet. He's done nothing wrong here. He takes over as coach. Right. And the first 5 questions out of the chute at his introductory press conference, which should be, in some ways, no one's ever celebrating the other coach being on the way out, but you are, for the most part, beginning to look forward. And in this case, that was not the mode on Sunday, and for good reason, because everyone still wants to know, how did this unravel so badly? So when you look at Rick Tochet and the impact that he's going to have, what did you take most from his press conference? Because he's someone that is also pretty blunt and honest and straightforward, but he also has a real nice way about relating with his players, in the sense that he's a really easy guy to communicate with. He's genuine. There's no fluff. You pretty much know exactly where you stand. And now he's stepping into a team where I feel like there's a lot of players in that room that want answers to how this is all unfolded. And more than that, I think he's stepping into a team in probably an incredibly tough spot, given what the players feel for the guy who's on his way out the door.
For sure. Yeah, and I've been coached by Rick Tochet. When I was with the Tampa Bay Lightning, when I first broke into the league, everything you said is 100% true about him, right? He's dead honest with you. He'll look you right in the eyes and tell you how he feels. But, ever since that season, and even during that season, I've always had a ton of respect and enjoyed my time with Rick when I've seen him. I just thought this was just so stupid of the Canucks not to have a press conference in the morning without Tocchet and then have another one either the next day or later in the day with Tocchet, to just try to separate it, because like you said, it created a big mess and he had to answer all these questions. The biggest thing for me is, can Tocchet get this team to defend? And I mean, Luke Schenn and Tyler Myers are probably the two most dependable defensemen on the team. They're both probably trade bait at this point. Can you get the forwards to buy in? Can JT Miller play defense? Can OEL turn his game around? There's a past history with Tocchet and OEL that wasn't always great when it comes to how to play in the NHL. So Tocchet does have a track record with the Coyotes of, when he was the head coach of that team, playing pretty strong defense. 2 of the years they were in the top 10 in defense. They also had Darcy Kemper as a goaltender playing well, though. So I think Tocchet has something to prove here from a defensive standpoint. And it really comes down to those communicating and the relationships that you mentioned. He mentioned it a ton in his press conference, and it's one of his greatest strengths. I'm sure he's going to go in, say hi to everybody, have as many lunches and dinners as he can, and try to figure out what makes the room tick. The problem is, half that room may not be here. Maybe not half, but there's going to be trades made and changes made. So I'm not sure where it goes. It's a tough gig, though, for Tocchet, because this isn't a quick fix in Vancouver.
Yeah, and that was one of the things you mentioned, the idea of a quick fix. That's exactly what Patrick Allvin says that it isn't. But then you kind of look at the comments from Jim Rutherford last week, and they kind of fly in the face of each other. Not a quick fix, but Jim Rutherford says it's going to be a retool. Like, a retool would imply that this is something that can be turned around in 12 to 18 months. And yet half the guys that are in that room probably aren't going to be here on the other end of it, or at least that's the hope from a salary cap perspective, if you really want to try and improve this team. And on top of the idea of this not being a quick fix, well, all the reports are that Rick Tochet got a 2.5-year contract. So which one is it, I guess, is what I'm left wondering. And just on the list of many questions, if you're a Vancouver Canucks fan heading into the Tocchet era. Speaking of coaches, got to ask you about Daryl Sutter and this absolute gem. Well, I guess if you're a fan of interesting social media clips that he had after Saturday's game, in which Jacob Pelletier made his NHL debut. Take a listen.
What did you think of Pelletier's debut?
What's that?
What did you think of Jacob's first few shifts in the NHL?
Jacob Pelletier. What number is he?
49.
49. 6 minutes, 35 seconds, 13 shifts, average 30 seconds a shift. Got 43 seconds in the power play, played 5 minutes, 52 seconds, had 1 shot and goal and 1 hit.
Beyond the stats.
What did you learn just from being on the bench and seeing what the veterans on the team are doing?
It's the NHL. 21 years old, got a long ways to go.
21 years old, got a long way to go. I think we all know that. But the snark with which Daryl Sutter delivers this, some would say, oh, it's his classic shtick. He's someone that doesn't love rookies, and, it takes a while to warm up to young players in this league. What number is he? This is your first-round pick that was tearing up the AHL, that had clearly deserved a promotion, that you then sat as a healthy scratch for his first 13 days in the NHL before finally putting him in the lineup. And that's the way you treat him? Your thoughts, Mike?
Players really don't like this type of thing. And I'll tell you what, I had a person reach out to me who had a similar experience years ago in his first NHL game. And he had flown in the day before, and the team hadn't given him any indication whether he was going to play or not. So he's got his family calling him, asking, are you in the lineup? We need to book airfare. We need to get there. We want to see this. And he kept saying, I don't think I'm probably going to play. So I don't know. Night before, nothing. Morning skate, nothing. Did the coaches even talk to him? Sutter didn't talk to him. Like, didn't even make eye contact, anything. None of the other coaches said anything about playing or not. It finally took a teammate telling him that he was in the lineup, and by that point, it was too late for his parents to attend his first NHL game. So, like, Daryl's as old school as they get. Your coach doesn't have to be your best friend, but you don't forget these things. And the person that talked to me about it just couldn't stand that, you know? Like, these are important moments. And the dismissiveness towards Pelletier, I mean, to me, it comes across as like Sutter thinks it's a joke. Well, this guy's a big-time prospect of yours, man. Like, give him his due, you know? Like, it reminded me of the line in Happy Gilmore when, oh, congrats, you can read. You know what I mean? When he read off the stat sheet, it's just not the right way to do things, man. Like, give your players some respect, celebrate them, pump them up a little bit, especially for a team that's not in the playoff picture right now. Like, they're out of a playoff spot. You need these players playing well. Give them some juice, man.
Not only do you need these players playing well because they're call-ups, you need them because that's how you have success in the NHL in general. The Flames, before Pelletier played, were the only team in the NHL to not have a player under the age of 22 in their lineup this season. Players are competing and being productive on entry-level contracts. They're making an impact in a way in the NHL as young guys that they never have previously, and in a consistent way. And so to then immediately discard or discount what they can bring, I think is the wrong way to go about it, let alone putting the player in an optimal position to succeed for his skill set. To me, it seems a constant battle this season between Flames management and Daryl Sutter. This is not the first time that this has happened. Matthew Phillips, another guy tearing up the AHL this season, another prize prospect. I know he's a smaller guy. I know he's slight. All those things. He sat for a while as a healthy scratch. He gets in 2 games between 8 and 9 minutes before management finally just throws his arm up in the air and says, well, what else are we going to do with this guy? We're better off sending him back to the Wranglers in the AHL to let him continue on his tear rather than sitting here languishing. I guess at a certain point they're going to come to the same realization with Pelletier, but I don't know that it needs to be that way. Let's talk about our trade deadline countdown series, which continues on dailyfaceoff.com today. 39 days to go until the NHL's trade deadline on March 3rd. Vladislav Gavrikov, the Columbus Blue Jackets defenseman, is the man profiled on dailyfaceoff.com later this afternoon. And Mike, he was again in the news over the weekend, headlines on Hockey Night in Canada. And basically, they were saying, hey, look, a couple teams have checked in on Gavrikov, Toronto and Edmonton. I do believe that to be the case, although I believe the list is a bit longer than just those 2 teams. And the response from the Columbus Blue Jackets has been, hey, we need about the same or maybe even a little bit more than we got from David Savard a couple years back, which was a hefty package. But Mike, going back and watching Gavrikov's game very closely, I've watched every shift that he's played this season. He has the moniker of being a physical defenseman, but he actually is not one. What do you think Gavrikov could bring to a team's lineup?
Well, you're bringing somebody who's pretty smart with the puck, who defends pretty well. But like you say, like, he's not a big bruiser. You know, he's not the guy that you're going to fear as you're going into a corner. He's just somebody that's pretty diligent in all areas. And it kind of feels like this is where the defensive market is headed this year. You know, some of your trade targets that are on your list so far, I mean, who are your top ones? You've got Chychrun, who's a puck mover. He plays hard as well. Gavrikov, to me, is kind of a 4 to 6 defenseman that you slide in when you need some help. And at $2.8 million, you know, it fits that mold. But if you're Toronto, if you're Edmonton, I guess maybe fits that. I think Vegas could use his help as well. But if they're not healthy by the end of the year, I'm curious to see for Gavrikov how much a team will give up if Savard's commanding first-round picks. You know, are we giving up first-round picks now for 5 and 6D at the trade deadline? Is that what it's going to warrant this year, Frank? Like, you got a good handle on it. It sure seems like, to me, that's where it's headed. I just don't know if there's going to be any buyer's remorse when this season is finally at the end, if that's what you pick up for Gavrikov.
I think there's certainly buyer's remorse from Ben Sherratt going last year from Montreal to Florida. I mean, Florida's clawing back into the playoff race, but for a while, Montreal's sitting there. This pick is not lottery protected. Could you imagine if they finish inside the top 10 and give us yet another crack at Connor Bedard? So I'm sure they're watching the standings quite closely there in Montreal. But when you think of Gavrikov and then you compare it to the Savard deal, it was a first and a third plus a 4th round pick to then eat some of the money through a third-party broker. That's a lot. First, third, and fourth. And Savard ended up being, which I think Gavrikov ideally slots as, which is a third pair defenseman on a Stanley Cup caliber roster. Maybe a second pair, a middle pair guy on another team that isn't quite as deep or as good, but in an ideal situation, that's probably where he ends up. Mike, it's Monday. That means it's time to talk goaltending as well. Let's get to this week's edition of the Blue Paint. All right, Mike, time for some goaltending talk this week with the blue paint delivered by our friends at Montana's. And Mike, I want to ask you about the Colorado Avalanche, who have won 5 games in a row, but number one goalie Alexander Georgiev was only in net for 2 of those games. Pavel Francouz has come on strong lately. Loved what we saw from him in the playoffs last year when he stepped in. What happens next in the Avalanche crease?
That's a good question, and I think it really still does go through Alexander Georgiev, who was brought in to be the number one goaltender of the Colorado Avalanche, despite Pavel Francouz performing in every year of his pro career. I mean, this guy has basically never had a save percentage below like a 910, like ever in his life, talking about Francouz. But I think what you've seen from Georgiev is just really peaks and valleys, man. He's ridden the roller coaster this year. He's had some great stretches coming out of the gates after the holiday break, after Christmas. Georgiev really struggled. Like lost 5 straight, didn't look good, smashed his stick over a crossbar. But he's now won 3 of his last 4 games, 901 save percentage in those. They were against Vancouver, Calgary, some lesser teams, but he only allowed 2 goals. So I think for the work that Francouz has done, he's probably still looked as a stopgap or a number 2 or a 1B, at least in Colorado, but they know he can get the job done. He's got a 920 on the season, and he's 5-1 in his last 6 starts. So I don't think it's a real horse race. I think Georgiev probably still has the upper hand in who they want to start come playoff time, should the Avalanche get there. I just think Francouz is going to push him the whole way. And if Georgiev falls off a cliff in advance of the Stanley Cup playoffs, I think they'd be happy to go to Francouz.
Maybe that's the best case scenario, is that you have a guy in Francouz who's ready and able and willing, and then pushing your guy in Georgiev to be a little bit better. He asked and clamored for this number one role. He's had the ability to do it, started off pretty well, as you said, and since Christmas has struggled a bit. Let's talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs and their net minding situation. They've got Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov. Both have started 19 games for the Leafs, but Samsonov has the better record and has occupied the crease in the past 2 outings. Their coach in Sheldon Keefe saying that Samsonov has earned it. Can Samsonov carry Toronto down the stretch?
Well, I've been really impressed with Samsonov this year. I kept waiting for a big regression. There was a little bit, and he's been pretty good. I keep referencing here since the Christmas break, because to me, that's a month out. It's a good time frame and sample size. And since Christmas, he's had a 911 save percentage since then. And his record, you see here, is 4-1-2. Well, it's also eye test, right? Like Samsonov, to me, has played with a lot of swagger, man. He looks confident. He's never going to be the most crisp goaltender. There's still times where I think he loses his patience and drops a little bit early, but he's been more consistent than Murray this year. Samsonov's only had 4 times this season where he allowed more than 4 goals in a game. You compare that with Murray, it's been 7 times for Murray, and Murray was pulled in his last outing against Florida, allowed 4 on 8. Murray struggled since Christmas. 8.82 save percentage, 3-3 record. And here's the thing, Frank. The book's out on Murray. Like, he's getting absolutely torched high glove side. He's only stopped 64% of shots to that location this season. And you compare that with Samsonov, who's very balanced. Like, he's at 78, 77% glove and blocker side high. You got a more balanced goaltender who's harder to score, and because of that, and I think the edge is going to go to Samsonov by the end of the season.
All right, on a 1 to 10 scale, what is your level of concern for Murray in that? Look, not everything's a straight line. There's going to be peaks and valleys, but these last 7 games, is this back to the same guy that he was in Ottawa?
I think it's kind of similar. I think the team's just better in front of him. You know, I haven't seen the biggest structural changes. He's just played with a little more urgency than last season that I'd seen. So I'm concerned about it. I'll probably say 6. If he's a 1B, I'm fine with it behind Samsonov, because Murray can still win games behind that team in Toronto.
So 6, not very high. So you're not turning the temperature up high. But It's been pretty high in Calgary this year, Mike, and their goaltending has received a lot of criticism. The team currently sits outside of the playoff picture. Can Jacob Markstrom finally get going, or would you turn over the reins to Dan Vladar, which, speaking of Daryl Sutter, he seems super hesitant or resistant to doing so?
Which is weird, Like, here's the thing. Markstrom's been really consistent all year. Like, he's been about an 8.95, 8.96, as you can see.
Consistently
between the season
bad.
numbers and since Christmas. I won't say bad. I think that's a bit off on Markstrom. I think he hasn't been bad. I think he's had bad goals against that have submarined him. So if you look at somebody consistently bad, look to Merzlikins in Columbus. But those one goal a game that he can't allow is what's crushing him here, Frank. So he's 2-4-1 since Christmas, and he really hasn't been able to put together an extended period of great games, and his win-loss record reflects that. You look at the goals saved above expected between these two, and Markstrom's well ahead of where Vladar is. Like, Markstrom's 34th in the league, Vladar's 68th in goals saved above expected. It's a season-long metric. But recently, Vladar's 4-0-1. He's 9-1-4 for the season, or 9-0-6 in the season, but 9-1-4 lately. So that says to me, Frank, Vladar is really starting to come into his own. He's winning games. And man, if you ask me, this is a real race, or it needs to be a race. I don't know if Sutter's going to let it be, but right now, Vladar is the goaltender in Calgary that's performing.
Yeah, there's no question Vladar has been, I think, consistently better than Markstrom. For whatever reason, Daryl Sutter has continued to treat it like, hey, buddy, you're just keeping Jacob Markstrom's seat warm. And maybe that's because he knows that he might need both when it comes to playoff time. I'd be still so curious over these next few months if the Flames are able to get in. First off, they're going to have to get better goaltending from Markstrom, I think, in order to get there, if he's going to be the guy that continues to carry the ball. And second, who would be their opening night starter in game one of the playoffs? Still so much to be determined. This has been the Blue Paint, which is delivered by our friends at Montana's. They're bringing back the viewing party all season long at Montana's. They've got their new comfort menu and daily deals. Today's Monday. That means half-price wings. So head on over to montanas.ca for the latest daily deals and head into Montana's. They've got their smoked menu, their comfort menu. It's all real good. All right, Mike, time for our daily face-off inbox question of the day. Hashtag AskDFO. We'd be happy to take your question. And Mike, it is pretty simple in this case. When you take a look at the Pacific Division, there's been a clear shift in the standings. The Edmonton Oilers are coming on hot. So if you were to take a look at the odds, who is the favorite, or who should be the favorite to win the Pacific this year?
Flip a coin, but I'm going to go with Edmonton. They were my preseason pick to win the Pacific. They've won 6 in a row. Jack Campbell looks good in the net. Evander Kane's back in the lineup and making a difference for that club. Listen, they're only 3 points behind a struggling Vegas team. I think it's a race between Seattle and Edmonton. Now, what about you, Frank?
Wow, so you're discounting the Golden Knights and saying that you don't think they have a shot to win. I would agree. I would say it's Edmonton's to lose. I think they're a team that has a really favorable schedule down the stretch. McDavid has always been historically great in March and April. So I think they're in a fine spot to win the division. But here's the thing, as you take a look at the odds, and we'll bring in our boy Tyler Yaremchuk to talk daily face-off, daily bets. But Tyler, give us your thoughts as well on, the Pacific. And when you look at this odds board here, I'm going, not really any incredible value in the Kraken, Oilers, or Golden Knights. I don't think the Flames are winning the division. I think it's a big stretch for them to even make the playoffs. But the LA Kings, 14-1, they were my preseason pick. They're kind of right in the thick of the race. Why is no one talking about the Kings as some of their young players have gotten better and better? And I think they're going to be a big trade deadline player this year when you consider that they have a bunch of pieces that they could move on their back end.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Frank. Like, if you want to try get rich quick, I suppose the LA Kings are a decent bet. They have played the most games in that division as well. But I'm also starting to think at some point the games in hand thing as the season goes on. Sure, it's great because you can build up a bunch of points. But the Kings having more games now means they have the most relaxed schedule down the stretch as well, right? They would play the least, the most days off. They could stay the most rested. So I think the Kings are interesting. The Oilers, I don't mind it at plus 215, but 10 days ago, you could have gotten them at plus 700, which is unbelievable. Right now, I'm not sure if I'm confident enough to touch them at plus 215, but it is fascinating stuff in that division.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's get to our points bet daily bet segment.
Yeah, let's keep rolling into what's going on tonight. Nothing I'm touching in terms of the Pacific Division. There's actually just one game I'm looking at, so let's dig into it, courtesy of our friends at PointsBet Canada. The Rangers are minus 136 on the money line against the Florida Panthers. And yeah, Florida's been playing some good hockey as of late. They have 7 wins in their last 10, but the Rangers have 6 wins in their last 10. They're not exactly playing terrible. They're rested. I'm hoping it's Igor Shesterkin between the pipes. It's going to be neither Bobrovsky or Spencer Knight for the Panthers. It's expected to be Alex Lyon. So an interesting goalie matchup as well. I think this line is too short. Yeah, the Rangers haven't been great on home ice this season, but the Panthers only have 11 road wins in 27 games. So I love New York. I think this line is way too short. And also a shot prop in this one. I am picking a Florida Panther, which is a little contrary, I suppose. But Carter Verhaeghe, that line set at 2.5, paying out pretty close to even money. Here's his last 5 games: 4 shots, 4 shots, 6 shots, 3 shots, 4 shots. He's crushing it. 5 in a row. Let's hope he goes for 6 in a row. Verhaeghe shot prop, Rangers money line. Those are my 2 plays, Frank.
Interesting, Tyler. Yeah, Spencer Knight, forgot to point out as well. He's back in the minors right now, coming off of that injury. So be curious to see when he makes his way back to the Florida Panthers. Thanks to Tyler Remchuk for our Points Bet Daily Bet segment. That brings us to Garbage Time with Mike McKenna. Mike, what's caught your eye? What's caught your attention from around the NHL?
Headless goaltenders. And it's because of the digital rink board ads that Gary Bettman has said are working extraordinarily well. Well, where's Vasilevsky here, Frank? I mean, he's gone, dude. And I actually saw this happen last night when I was watching the game between Vegas and Arizona. It happened to Logan Thompson as well. His whole upper body just disappeared. So listen, I'm actually in the camp that I don't mind the digital rink board ads. I think they do work pretty well most of the time. But when things happen like this, it's pretty glaring. So I think it just shows that it is a work in progress. I appreciate that the NHL is trying to find new revenue streams and be creative with it. But this is kind of a bad look, though, man. Like, I mean, even look at the Tampa Bay defenseman's head floating behind him, Frank. Like, that's comical.
It's like he's
best,
taped to the wall by a Publix ad. Like, come on.
Yeah, he's a fathead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. I just it needs to keep being improved. I don't mind it at all, but this was just funny to me.
Yeah, I'm not one of those people that's going to feign outrage at it either, but I just think there's no other professional sports league on the planet that would allow this to happen on such a consistent basis. And then to sit here and turn around and say, like, we're all dumb, nothing to see here, move along, it's working extraordinarily well. Come on. It's not. We know it's not. Just fix it. Be better. I'm all for the revenue stream and whatever else. Business is business. We get it. Sometimes you have to do things you don't like. But in this case, just make it better. Just fix it. Yep. That'll do it for today's edition of Daily Faceoff Live. Thanks to Mike McKenna, Tyler Remchuk, as well as our head of production, Alex Allard. You know where to find us. We'll be back 12 noon Eastern on Tuesday. We'll talk to you then.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.